My 21-year-old Chloe called. David nervously left and didn't return all night, and my heart sank instantly after I discovered David was cheating. I never imagined it would be with my Chloe. My name is Eleanor. I'm 35 years old, and I've been married to David for 10 years. We have two sons. The older one is Leo, and the younger one is Max. Our family was once happy and complete, but David has been acting stranger and stranger lately. David and I were middle school classmates and dated for 7 years before getting married, in our friends' eyes. We went from school uniforms to wedding attire. David was always good to me, earned well, managed the household, and often helped me with the kids after work. In an age where divorce is as common as eating out, we were considered a model couple. But recently, I noticed David was acting increasingly strange. He spent longer and longer in the bathroom, started playing on his phone during meals, and occasionally stare at it, chuckling to himself with a dreamy, infatuated smile, just like he did when we were dating initially. I didn't think much of it, assuming David was just watching short videos to pass the time. After all, work and family pressure were quite significant, but one day, when I happened to pass by the bathroom, I heard David whisper someone's name, calling them honey. Remembering the details my friends shared about their husbands cheating, a warning bell went off in my mind. As I leaned closer to listen, I heard the sound of water running in the bathroom, so I had to give up. But once suspicion takes root, it's hard to shake. That night, after David fell into a deep sleep, I hesitated but ultimately picked up his phone and started looking through it. There were no other accounts, no suspicious chat history. It was mostly work-related or messages from family relatives. The only slightly unusual thing was a work-related question from Chloe, but even that chat history seemed harmless, so I dismissed my suspicions, thinking I must have misheard. The next day, David went to work and came home as usual. He didn't make excuses for a client event, and when I checked his clothes, I found no lipstick or hair from another woman. Slowly, I let my worries go. David and I had loved each other for so many years. How could he betray me? It seemed I was just too idle lately, starting to imagine things. At 7 that evening, our family had finished dinner and was sitting on the couch, while our two sons played. I saw David wearily rubbing his head, so I quickly got up to pour him a glass of water. Sitting beside him, I began to massage his temples, and he leaned back against my lap. "If you're really that tired, take a few days off, David," I said, continuing to massage his head. David frowned, seemingly displeased. "What do you know? This is when the kids need money the most. All those tutoring and extracurricular classes later, they don't come cheap." I instinctively wanted to retort, but after a moment's thought, I realized David was right, so I stayed silent. Ring, 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 ring. My phone rang. Without thinking, I picked it up and answered, while David remained leaning back with his eyes closed. A sweet voice quickly came through the phone, "Uncle." I was a little surprised. David, however, immediately opened his eyes and snatched the phone. His movement was so abrupt that I was pushed onto the couch, and the phone fell to the floor. Leo and Max heard the commotion and immediately ran over to help me up. Max hugged me tightly, while Leo went straight up and kicked David. "That's for hurting Mom, you bad dad." David seemed to want to say something, but the girl's youthful, energetic voice continued from the phone. "I need to talk to you about something. Can you come over?" David glanced at the children, then anxiously picked up his phone and went out to the balcony. I was left holding Leo and Max, comforting the two little ones. I tried to explain to Leo that his dad hadn't meant it and that H'd apologize later. A few minutes later, David emerged from the balcony, ignored Leo's attempt to apologize, and hurried into the room to change his clothes. My heart sank a little. I told Leo and Max to go back to their room and that we'd talk tomorrow. When reappeared, he had changed into a white t-shirt and jeans. This was David's favorite outfit when he was younger, but now, approaching 40, it looked a bit out of place on him. I was about to ask something when, "Honey, Chloe called me to come over for something." I forgot, but I also have a client event tonight. With that, David quickly kissed me and rushed out, not giving me a chance to react. By the time I processed it, David was gone, and the scent of perfume lingered in the air. A warning bell went off in my mind. David's attire was too unusual. But then I thought of Chloe, and my suspicions subsided again. Chloe is my niece. She's just in her junior year of college and needed an internship, so I introduced her to David's company. Chloe's mother and I grew up together, even becoming sworn sisters when we were children. You could say David and I watched Chloe grow up. No matter how terrible David might be, He wouldn't lay a hand on his own Chloe. Besides, it really was Chloe on the phone. There's no way I wouldn't recognize my own Chloe's voice. Thinking of all this, I felt a little relieved, but the young, beautiful scent and David's strange behavior still kept my mind unsettled. At dawn, David still hadn't returned. Usually, I wouldn't care, but now I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. I thought about my friends whose husbands cheated, many of whom were left with nothing. I started an online post, asking if my husband's recent strange behavior, constantly smiling at his phone, becoming overly concerned with his appearance, meant he was cheating. Before long, my phone buzzed with a variety of replies. Some thought I was paranoid without evidence, but most agreed my suspicions were reasonable, suggesting I pay more attention when David went to the bathroom or check his phone. I picked a few to respond to, like how I couldn't find anything by checking Venmo. The internet truly is powerful. Within minutes, someone sent me a compiled list of suggestions. They suggested checking Amazon purchase history, DoorDash order history, and even Venmo transfer history. I read with great interest, marveling at how many strange and wonderful things exist in the world. I would have never thought of these methods before. I fell asleep before David returned. The next morning, I wasn't sure if it was just my imagination, but David was in an exceptionally good mood from the moment he woke up. He even seemed unusually patient with Leo and Max's crying and suggested he take them to school. Leo is in 3rd grade now, and Max is in kindergarten. David had never taken them to school. It had always been my job, not to mention how dressed up David was today, so cheerfully taking our sons to school bright and early. My suspicions grew. Could David be having an affair with our son's teacher? I immediately agreed to David's request. After took our sons downstairs, I quietly followed behind. Strangely, all I saw along the way was David picking up Chloe. Other than that, it was just a normal school drop-off, with nothing else happening. I returned home feeling doubtful. All signs pointed to David cheating, yet I couldn't find any concrete evidence. I sat at home, completely baffled. Could it really be Chloe? Suddenly, a netizen's reply flashed in my mind. I needed to check David's phone. That night, while David was asleep, I quietly took his phone. It didn't have a password, because I had never checked his phone before. I originally thought checking it would ease my doubts, but the shocking expenses brought tears to my eyes. David was indeed cheating, even though he lay beside me, looking utterly harmless, even though he usually got off work on time and was so considerate towards me. Those days he claimed to be on business trips. At least one of them was spent in a king-size bed at some hotel. And on his Amazon purchase history, there were records of lingerie and other items. These weren't for me. David's business trips were always booked through the company account, so that single day's hotel booking was clearly with another woman. Looking at the sleeping man, I almost wanted to choke him, but reason told me I couldn't. My children still needed me. I bit down hard on my lip to stifle any sound, tears streaming down my face, my heart desolate. My lip broke from the pressure, and the pain, accompanied by the taste of blood, was nothing compared to the agony in my soul. My mind began racing. The down payment for the house we lived in now was paid by my parents, and I had been paying the mortgage with that scoundrel. The mortgage was paid off, and the deed was in my name, but since the house was purchased during the marriage, it was considered marital property. If I divorced now, David would get half. Plus, with the miscellaneous savings over the years, it would amount to over 500,000. I needed stronger evidence to ensure David was left with nothing. That was my best guarantee for getting full custody of the children. I reopened the online post, and there were even more replies now, and many people had messaged me privately. One online post from a divorced single mom particularly resonated with me. She advised me to install a GPS tracker on David and also to check for any private photo albums. She suggested logging into accounts on my phone to check everything, and to take financial control into my own hands. Arguing that my money shouldn't be spent on other women, I followed the suggestions in the online post one by one, and even searched for more methods on the internet. After doing all this, looking at David made me feel sick. I couldn't bear to sleep in the same bed with him. So I took my pillow and went to my son's bedroom. In the bedroom, Leo and Max were sleeping soundly. To foster their bond, Leo and Max had always slept together, so they were very close and were even curled up together in their sleep. Looking at my sons, my heart ached even more. I walked over and gently touched Leo's cheek, and tears involuntarily fell as I thought about the days ahead. Leo seemed to sense my presence and open his eyes. "Mommy." Leo blinked at me, his eyes heavy with sleep. I quickly wiped away my tears and kissed his cheek. Go back to sleep. Honey, you have school tomorrow. Leo, however, rubbed his eyes and carefully got up to hug me. You're crying, aren't you? Don't cry, Mommy. Honey is here. Hearing's comfort. My tears fell uncontrollably. I held my son tightly. David and I loved each other for 7 years before getting married and having children. After so many years of shared life, his cheating was like a dagger to my heart, but I couldn't collapse. I still had my sons and my home to protect. Falling asleep holding Leo and Max brought me some comfort. After days of worrying about David's infidelity, I finally got a good night's sleep. In the morning, Leo and Max woke up in my arms. Max secretly kissed my face, and I instinctively opened my eyes. Mommy, why are you under Max's covers? Is it a surprise for Max? Before my eyes was a smiling Max, looking at me with surprise. I gently ruffled his hair. Beside us, Leo was already fully dressed. He grabbed Max and started helping him change. Don't bother Mommy. She slept late yesterday. Get up. Well, ask Dad to take us to school. Max pouted, a little displeased but not daring to express it. Leo was generally obedient at home, but Max was still most afraid of his older brother. After and Max, fully dressed, went out to brush their teeth, I remained lying in bed. I lay contemplating. David, as deep as my love was then, so deep is my hatred now, and my sweet Chloe. Although I didn't want to admit it, everything that had happened pointed to my seemingly innocent Chloe. After a moment of sadness, I struggled to get up. David had already taken Leo and Max to school. I hastily ate a few bites of bread, grabbed my bag, and headed out. It was time for me to act. At noon, I pretended to tell David I was going back to my parents' house, asking him to pick up Leo and Max, and that I wouldn't be home that night. Since I often stayed at my parents' house, David didn't think much of it and simply said okay, even reminding me to be careful. Although his voice on the phone was as usual, after so many years together, I detected a hint of suppressed joy in his tone, just like when we were dating. A bitter taste filled my mouth. That afternoon, I, who was supposed to be at my parents' house, appeared at the coffee shop across from David's office. I found a corner to sit in and began to plan my next steps. Before I could think much, it was already quitting time, and I saw David and Chloe walk out. They were laughing and chatting, and the people around them seemed used to it. From a distance, they really did look like a couple. I don't know what David said, but Chloe shyly tapped his chest. A dull ache spread through my heart. I had treated Chloe like my own daughter, yet she had betrayed me with my own husband. Watching go to his car, I fought back tears and hailed a taxi to follow them. The driver was an older woman who seemed to notice my reddened eyes and started to offer comfort. Honey, is your husband cheating? Women, you have to look on the bright side. At least you have your children. Don't cry anymore. I'll make sure to catch up to them. I didn't say anything. The events of the past few days had suffocated me, and I burst into tears, thinking of my sons, thinking of how I treated Chloe like my own child all these years, and then thinking of David and my decade-long relationship. It all felt like a cruel joke at this very moment. The driver handed me a tissue. Honey, it looks like your husband's car has stopped. I looked up. It was my son's school. David and Chloe were each holding one of Leo and Max's hands. They truly looked like a family of 4. For years, Chloe had often been at my house, so Leo and Max weren't strangers to her. In fact, they were quite close. I used to think siblings should be close, but at that moment, I realized how terrifying it was. I watched my son affectionately hug his so-called sister and even kiss Chloe. David looked utterly blissful, and my heart felt like it was bleeding. The driver in the front seat seemed a bit at a loss. Simply continuing to hand me tissues, I raised my phone, pointed it at them, and started taking pictures. Tears dripped down my face, and my nails dug into my hand, a sharp pain reminding me to stay focused. Even though I wanted that cheating couple to drop dead right then and there, I had to stay rational. I needed to gather the most compelling evidence. It was my last card to keep my sons. Honey, the car in front is moving. Shall we go? Go. The car drove towards the city's busiest mall. Couples walked sweetly hand in hand along the street. Suddenly, a young couple in school uniforms caught my eye. The boy quietly pulled out a bouquet from behind his back, and the girl cried tears of surprise. It was so touching. Just like David and I used to be. If it were me, I would have eagerly thrown myself into his arms. Everything from our student days couldn't be faked. I had seen how David loved me then, so I knew clearly that he no longer did. Everyone talks about the 7-year itch in marriage. I used to scoff at it, believing love conquers all obstacles, But love also meets all obstacles. Honey, we're here. Please don't do anything drastic. What about your children if something happens to you? The driver looked at me hesitating. Then I wiped away my tears and forced a smile that was uglier than a cry. Thank you. I got out of the car and looked up at the rapidly fading sunset. Thank you, stranger, I am a mother, so I will live, and I will live brilliantly, more so than anyone else. Ahead, David led the three others into a popular hot pot restaurant in the mall. The owner of the popular hot pot restaurant greeted them cheerfully. My tears seemed to have dried up, but my heart still ached as if I were dying. I watched David and Chloe sit at our favorite table. I saw him carefully tending to another woman, even taking the hair tie off his wrist to tie Chloe's hair. Suddenly, my stomach churned, and I felt a wave of nausea. It was truly sickening. That was the popular hot pot restaurant where David and I first met. And that was my favorite hair tie. In the end, I couldn't hold it in. I rushed into the bathroom and vomited. As I washed my hands, I looked at my reflection in the mirror and suddenly laughed. I didn't have Chloe's youthful face after having children. My skin and figure were particularly poor, and today's crying made me look even more disheveled. Messy hair, a haggard face. It was laughable. When I was young, I was also a vibrant, pretty girl. I wasn't 20 anymore. I wasn't young, and he had fallen in love with a 20-year-old girl. When he had nothing, I chose him in his lowest moment. Now that my looks have faded, he no longer chooses me. I kept laughing, and then tears started falling again, a pain in my throat. I quickly washed my face, tidied my messy hair, and forced a smile at my reflection. People coming and going in the bathroom looked at me strangely. I tried not to look too disheveled, but at that moment, I felt like I was shattering. As I walked out of the bathroom, I let out a long breath. A few figures appeared before me. David, Chloe, and Leo and Max. I quickly dodged back into the bathroom. Leo glanced back and asked, puzzled, Dad, I smell Mommy. Where did Mommy go? I saw a hint of panic on David's face as he looked around. I found it utterly ironic. The person who used to look at me with eyes full of laughter now felt fear just hearing my name. Since he didn't see me, David calmed down significantly. He picked up Leo and left the mall. I followed behind. The rest of the journey was quick, but I wished it would slow down. After dropping Leo and Max home, David and Chloe left the house. Leo was probably too sensitive, and David was afraid the kids would find out, so he didn't dare let Chloe stay at our house. Good, at least my home was still clean. At this point, I could no longer feel sad. Perhaps once a heart dies, no ripples can be stirred. I took out my phone and started taking pictures and recording videos of David and Chloe. After recording, I slowly walked over. I now had proof of David's infidelity. It was time to deal with that cheating couple. I walked quickly up to them, patted David's shoulder, and as he turned, I slapped him. The force was so great that David fell to the ground, covering his cheek and looking at me in shock. Chloe, completely unprepared, was pulled down to the ground by David. Looking at the two of them on the ground, then up at the hotel, I curled my lips in a sarcastic smile. David had now recovered his senses. He knelt before me. Honey, it's just as you see. Let's get a divorce. I recoiled a few steps in disbelief, the wound in my heart raw and bleeding. How ridiculous. I had expected David to offer some explanations or try to salvage things, but he just admitted it directly. I looked at Chloe on the ground. She was still sitting there, gazing in surprise from David to me. Perhaps sensing my gaze, her eyes met mine quickly, then darted away. I saw a few tears fall from her eyes. Normally, I would have comforted this girl I treated like a daughter, but now, I only felt disgust, pure disgust. I couldn't cry anymore. My emotions were flat. I said, David, it's just as I saw. How laughable. We had over a decade of shared life, plus Leo and Max, and now you cheat. And with my own Chloe no less, and you think a simple divorce makes it all go away. It's ridiculous. David's expression was conflicted. He seemed to want to say something but then gave up, just standing there. Chloe, however, was agitated. She grabbed my hand, her face streaked with tears. Aunt, I was wrong. Uncle and I are truly in love. Aunt slap. Before she could finish, a slap landed on Chloe's face. It was Chloe's mother, my sworn sister, Sarah. That's right. I had called Sarah when I was nearing the hotel. David, consider this your first big gift from me. Sarah's husband had cheated years ago and started a new family. I had always helped support her and Chloe, but they still lived in poverty, which was why she hated mistresses so much. Sarah looked at Chloe kneeling on the ground, her face filled with sorrow. I paid for your education for this kind of thinking. Don't you know how good Aunt has been to you? You've turned into an ungrateful wretch, just like your father, Sarah said, and then slapped Chloe again. I quickly stepped in to stop her. Chloe fell to the ground from the blows. The girl had been pampered since childhood. She couldn't handle such humiliation. Mom, I'm your daughter. How can you help an outsider hit me? Aunt's looks have faded, so what's wrong with letting me have uncle? I'll take care of Aunt in her old age. Listen to that. Such a backward statement. Meanwhile, David just stood there without a word. Men truly are the most heartless. I ignored the drama behind me and went home. At that moment, I was physically and emotionally exhausted. When I pushed open the door, Leo and Max were sitting watching TV. Hearing my voice, they quickly ran over and hugged me. They were my only comfort. Max blinked with a smile, but Leo was clearly unhappy. I half squatted and ruffled Leo's hair. What's wrong, Leo? Leo carefully hugged me. Mommy, I saw you today. You were crying, weren't you? Don't cry, Mommy. Leo was wrong. Chloe is a bad person. I asked, a little puzzled. Leo, didn't you always like Chloe? Why do you say she's a bad person? Leo fidgeted, then whispered conspiratorially into my ear, Mommy, Chloe told Max and me to call her Mommy. Max doesn't know any better. But I know I only have one mommy. Mommy, are you going to leave Max and me? As spoke, he started crying, and when Max saw his brother crying, he also burst into tears. I frantically wiped away both children's tears. Leo and Max, no matter what happens between Dad and Mom, Mommy will never abandon you. Don't cry, okay? I held Leo and Max tightly. Their crying made my heart ache. David, Chloe, if you're ruthless, don't blame me for being unjust. The next day, I quickly contacted my parents and extended family, and even hired a band. I organized a public shaming outside Chloe's apartment, complete with banners and a megaphone. The banners read, Homewrecker, and included Chloe's photo. Everywhere we went, many people turned their heads repeatedly, and many others started filming videos. By the time we reached Chloe's apartment complex, a crowd of onlookers had gathered, whispering among themselves as they watched my procession. Soon, Sarah and Chloe appeared downstairs at the apartment complex. Sarah looked haggard, leaning on Chloe for support. She gazed at me with a pained expression, tears welling in her eyes. My heart felt no ripples. Sarah had always dotted on Chloe, and I had warned her many times. Chloe had grown up knowing how to do almost nothing. I had tolerated everything before, but my children were my absolute bottom line. Sarah pulled Chloe and made her kneel before me. She looked at me, her face pleading, Please, can you let Chloe off the hook? If you do this today, how will Chloe ever get married? I sneered. Sarah, you want me to forgive her? Then tell me, are you certain you knew nothing about this? Didn't I already make way for her? Does she still need to get married? Sarah froze. A jolt went through me. She really did know everything. How could she not have noticed anything all this time? David was constantly on business trips, and Chloe wasn't coming home. How could Sarah not know? But and I had been best friends since childhood. How could she bear to treat me this way? I continued. Sarah, you and I grew up together. I treated Chloe like my own daughter. All these years, I've tolerated everything, so I invited a wolf into my home, didn't I? Sarah's mouth was slightly open, but she said nothing. She knelt beside Chloe. Please, I'm begging you. Let Chloe off the hook. You watch this child grow up. You can't push her to her death. I laughed uproariously. Sarah, you're doing this for your child, and I'm doing this for mine. If I let her go, who will let me go? If suffers any psychological harm, I'll make sure her name goes viral online across the entire world. Chloe's face was defiant. She stubbornly pulled Sarah up, making her stand. Aunt, you're finally showing your true colors. What about your own kids? It's just a man, and you won't even let me have him. She pulled Sarah closer, saying excitedly, Mom, do you see? This is your good sister, who used to act like she cared about you so much. Now that there's trouble, she immediately changes her tune. All that help before was just charity, wasn't it? Acting all high and mighty, you frumpy wife. That feeling of disgust returned. For all these years, I had paid her tuition, her food, drink, entertainment, and travel. I had never mistreated my Chloe. Leo and Max together wouldn't have cost that much. Now, a single word charity erased everything. How laughable, how truly laughable. I looked at Sarah. She kept wiping away her tears, remaining silent. I felt a chill run through my body. A small kindness fosters gratitude. A large one can breed resentment. I closed my eyes briefly, and when I reopened them, They were devoid of emotion. I'm here to demand accountability. Will you face the consequences? Chloe sneered. Aunt, Uncle likes me now. Why don't you just step aside? I laughed, a laugh on the verge of breaking down, and retorted, is that so? Then why don't you pay this bill for me? The papers I flung flew into the air, detailing various transfers and thousands of dollars in expenses. Chloe's face turned pale, and Sarah's body swayed precariously. This bill, totaling hundreds of thousands, nearly crushed them. People around them pointed and whispered. There was no longer a place for them in this city. I turned away with a flourish, my heart aching as if it were being torn apart. My sister, my Chloe, my David, overnight. I had nothing left but my sons, but I couldn't fall apart. A woman is fragile, but a mother is strong. Falling asleep holding Leo and Max became my final solace that night. David had vanished as if into thin air, never reappearing after being exposed. I no longer wanted to cry, nor did I want to blame anyone. Love or lack thereof, it no longer mattered. By dawn, the scandal of the concubine went viral online. Chloe became the universally condemned mistress, and I requested time off from school for Leo and Max. The repercussions of this incident were too immense. I wouldn't allow anyone to hurt my children again. After doing all this, I contacted a lawyer and filed a lawsuit in court. This money, he would have to pay it, whether he wanted to or not. It was marital property, with no notation of being a voluntary gift. Speaking of which, I truly had David to thank. The internet continued to buzz, with netizens' opinions varied. Some thought I was too cruel, others cursed Chloe for being an ungrateful wretch. I didn't care anymore, but I never expected the internet to give me another big surprise. Chloe also had a boyfriend around her age. When brought Chloe to kneel before my front door, Alex, the young man, also showed up. He pulled at Chloe's hair. I treated you so well, and you betrayed me. Even going after your own uncle? You really are a vile woman. Chloe struggled, trying to scratch Alex's face, but the strength difference was too great. She could only take the blows, crying incessantly in front of my house. Aunt, open the door. Save me, Aunt. Sarah also kept pounding on the door. I remained and moved inside. Leo and Max were already at my parents' house, so I had nothing to fear anymore. Before long, the police arrived. All three were arrested. Sarah and Chloe tried to knock on the door again, but they were forcefully taken away. I wanted to clap in approval. At the police station, Chloe also received a subpoena from the court. I heard she was wailing, begging for forgiveness, while Sarah came to my door and knelt, banging her head. I watched indifferently from inside, knowing that you reap what you sow. In the end, Sarah couldn't afford to pay the money, especially since the house she lived in was also mine. Chloe was arrested and sentenced to 3 years. Sarah quickly moved out of the city. After all, she was now a public enemy. At this point, David actually sent me divorce papers. He was left with nothing, and Leo and Max were mine. This was unexpected. I had thought it would take more time to finalize the divorce, but David was surprisingly cooperative, showing no concern for Chloe's fate. Men really are fickle and ungrateful. The day I finalized the divorce, I felt the air was much fresher. David remained silent the whole time, only cooperating with the paperwork, and he left with remarkable nonchalance. I watched his retreating back. The young man I had loved in my youth was no longer the same. Who could have imagined we would end up like this? My phone rang. It was my parents. As soon as I answered, my father's loving voice came through. Honey, your mom and dad will always be here for you. Come home. In that moment, my tears burst forth. I moved back to my parents' house with Leo and Max, and life returned to how it used to be. I started working and focused on myself. After this whole ordeal, I learned that you have to love yourself before you can truly love others. Not long after, I received news that David had contracted a terminal illness, but that no longer concerned me. Leo and Max were in my arms now, and that was more important than anything. That's all for today's story. Thank you for listening. This is my channel. The tales I share drawn from life or woven from imagination are meant to offer you connection, reflection, and perhaps solace or newfound strength. If you long to see your own reflection in others' journeys, or seek a glimmer of light within the maze of emotions, subscribe to my channel. Listen with your heart. Explore the stories of life.